Prepare yourself to learn about one of the most remarkable survival stories ever recorded, involving a possible case of cannibalism at sea. Welcome. From now on, you'll discover the story of Jose Alvarenga, a fisherman from El Salvador who faced the impossible, relentless storms, starvation, absolute loneliness, and even the loss of his companion during 438 days adrift in the Pacific. By the end of this story, you'll understand why his tale sparked doubts, accusations, and even dark theories. It was December 21st, 2012, and the west coast of Mexico seemed calmer than usual. Jose Alvarenga, nicknamed Chancha by his fellow fishermen, was known for his skills at sea and his tough but kind-hearted demeanor. That day, he had no idea he was about to embark on the most terrifying journey of his life. Jose was no stranger to challenges. As a shark fisherman, he knew the ocean was no place for amateurs. One had to respect its rules and always be prepared. But that day, his usual partner was unavailable, and he had to improvise. This was how young Ezequiel Cordoba, an experienced but eager to earn some extra money, entered the picture. "Are you ready?" Jose asked. "Yes, sir," Ezequiel replied nervously. But the truth was, no one is ever fully ready to face the sea. The boat they were using was a simple fiberglass canoe, about 26 feet long, functional, but far from luxurious. Boats like this were common in the region, light, cheap, and easy to handle. However, they had one glaring issue. Any engine failure could turn a fishing trip into a nightmare. On board, Jose carried only the essentials: fishing hooks, knives, a VHF radio, a gallon of water, and a cooler to store their catch. Nothing sophisticated. He relied on his experience to handle unforeseen events. But as the sea itself often teaches, experience only takes you so far. When they set off that morning, the sun was high, the wind was gentle, and the waves were calm. Everything seemed to align for a successful day. But as Jose well knew, the sea loves to play trick sand. This was about to be one of its cruelest. The first 2 days at sea were nearly perfect. Jose and Ezequiel caught about 880 pounds of shark meat, filling the cooler to its limit. For Ezequiel, who was on his first fishing trip, it felt like a grand success. He laughed, asked questions about the job, and started gaining confidence. Jose, experienced and observant, watched the young man with a mix of satisfaction and caution. After all, he knew the sea could be treacherous. But on the third day, the tide turned literally. The boat's engine started to fail. At first, it was just a strange noise, like it was choking. Then, it went silent. Jose tried everything, fiddling with the tank, adjusting the carburetor, even disassembling part of the engine with the few tools he had on board. But nothing worked. "It's just a glitch. We'll fix it quickly," Jose reassured Ezequiel. But the truth was far bleaker. Without an engine, the boat was at the mercy of the currents, adrift in an unpredictable ocean. To make matters worse, their VHF radio, which could have been their salvation, had a low battery. Jose managed to send a brief distress call, but the radio soon died. They were completely alone. As if a broken engine and no communication weren't enough, the horizon began to change. Heavy clouds, laden with ominous gray, appeared out of nowhere. Jose knew what this meant. "A storm," he muttered, "and a big one." The waves began to grow, and the wind picked up speed. The boat, once stable, now rocked violently. "Hold on to everything you can," Jose shouted to Ezequiel as they scrambled to secure their equipment and the sharks they caught. But as the first drops of rain fell, it became clear that wouldn't be enough. For 4 days, they endured the worst the ocean could throw at them. Giant waves crashed against the boat as if trying to overturn it. The rain was relentless, and the wind ripped away anything not tied down. They made a tough decision: to throw away their precious shark catch. "No point in having fish if the boat sinks," Jose said, blending sadness with practicality. By the end of the storm, the boat was intact, but all that remained was an empty hull, no engine, no radio, and Not enough food. The current had dragged the boat into the open Pacific, far from the coast and out of any rescue route. When the sea finally calmed, harsh reality set in. They were adrift, directionless, in an ocean where everything seemed larger and more intimidating. Jose knew there was no longer any hope for a rescue. It's just us and the sea now, he told Ezequiel, trying to appear calm but fully aware of the desperate situation. In the first few days, the rationed food and water gave them a false sense of control, but the relentless heat soon took its toll. The water evaporated faster than expected, and the gallon that seemed sufficient at first began to run dry. Jose, drawing on his experience, began improvising. They used their hands to catch small fish that swam near the boat when they spotted seabirds. Jose crafted makeshift traps, hoping to catch them for precious meat and fluids at sea. You learn quickly that anything that moves can be food, he explained to Ezequiel, trying to lighten the mood with dark humor. Despite Jose's ingenuity, the truth was brutal. The sea does not forgive. While they struggled to survive, the ocean seemed to grow larger around them, as if to remind them there was no easy escape. Jose gazed at the horizon one last time, before lying down that night. The vastness of the ocean seemed to whisper, "This is just the beginning." The days after the storm were suffocating. The sky seemed like an endless blue desert. The scorching heat turned the boat into a floating oven, and hunger was a constant weight in their stomachs. Jose and Ezequiel stared at the horizon, hoping to see anything that could save them. But all they saw was water and more water. "Someone will find us," Jose kept saying, trying to mask his own despair. Yet, with each passing day without a sign of rescue, that phrase sounded less like hope and more like a lie. Rain, which once seemed like a relief, became an obsession. Whenever clouds appeared on the horizon, they prayed they would drift toward the boat. When it rained, they used makeshift buckets and even their mouths to capture every drop. Rainwater tasted like life, but on dry days, the hot air cracked their lips and the thirst gnawed at their minds. Hunger began to change everything. At first, they tried to eat the leftover bait, small pieces of rotting fish covered in flies. It was revolting, but the instinct to survive overpowered their disgust. Jose swallowed without complaint, but Ezequiel gagged every time. "If you don't eat, you'll die," Jose warned, his voice firm. But Ezequiel shook his head, clutching his stomach. "I can't, it's disgusting." Jose knew he had to find something better. He began using his hands to catch fish. Each attempt was a struggle. The fish slipped away, wriggled, and fought, but when he finally succeeded, Jose ate it raw. The meat was slimy, salty, and metallic. Ezequiel recoiled at the sight, covering his nose. "Eat," Jose insisted, holding the gutted fish in front of him. "It's this or death." But Ezequiel barely managed a bite before spitting it out, tears streaming down his face. When seabirds began landing on the boat, Jose saw an opportunity. Using improvised ropes, he managed to catch one. The smell of raw meat mixed with warm blood was unbearable, but Jose knew it was their only chance to survive. He shared the bird with Ezequiel, but the boy only stared at the piece in his hand, as if it were worse than the hunger. The greatest success came when they caught a turtle. Jose held it down tightly while Ezequiel looked on in silence, almost in shock. With his knife, Jose cracked open the shell, exposing the meat and fluids. "This will save us," he said, slicing pieces for both of them. But for Ezequiel, each bite was an almost impossible struggle. In the first months, Jose and Ezequiel found strength in each other. They shared what little food they had, faced the freezing nights, and prayed together, holding hands under the starry sky. Jose, with his experience, took on the role of leader. But he knew Ezequiel was the emotional anchor that kept him grounded. "As long as we stick together, we'll survive," Jose would say, trying to keep hope alive. But as weeks turned into months, reality began to crush Ezequiel. The lack of food and water, combined with the scorching daytime heat and bone-chilling cold at night, became too much for him to bear. Jose noticed the first signs of depression when Ezequiel started isolating himself. He spent hours in silence, staring at the horizon, murmuring words as if talking to himself. The worst came when Ezequiel began refusing food. At first, it was just a bite or two less. Then, he stopped eating altogether. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered weakly, pushing away a piece of raw fish Jose had caught. "You have to eat, kid," Jose insisted, shoving the food into Ezequiel's hand. "If you stop, the sea will take you." But Ezequiel shook his head, too weak to chew or even respond. As days passed, Ezequiel's body weakened. His once hopeful eyes now looked vacant. Jose tried to keep him hydrated, but even water was rejected. By the 4th month, Ezequiel succumbed, most likely to starvation. Jose was devastated. He had lost not only a companion in the struggle, but also the only human connection, keeping him sane. "I should have done more," he murmured, holding Ezequiel's body in his arms. For 4 days, Jose kept the body on the boat, praying for a miracle. He hoped that God or the ocean itself would do anything to bring Ezequiel back. When he realized nothing would change, Jose performed what he called a burial at sea. He wrapped Ezequiel's body in a piece of fabric and, with tears streaming down his face, let him drift into the waters. "Rest in peace, kid," he said, watching the body disappear beneath the waves. From that moment on, the boat became eerily silent. Without Ezequiel, Jose was completely alone, just him, the ocean, and the challenge of surviving an unimaginable void. After Ezequiel's body disappeared into the water, Jose felt the crushing weight of solitude. The silence on the boat was deafening. There was no one left to share tasks, prayers, or even rare moments of hope. All that remained was the sound of the sea, endless, indifferent, and relentless. Jose tried convincing himself he had to go on, but Ezequiel's absence lingered everywhere. He avoided looking at the spot where the young man used to sit, as if the sight of that emptiness would destroy him from within. "It's just you now, Chancha," he told himself, trying to believe he could survive alone. But a part of him no longer believed it. At his darkest moment, Jose began to think the sea might be the answer. He picked up a knife he used for gutting fish and pressed it against his skin. The cold metal seemed like the only real thing in a world that had lost all meaning. He hesitated. "If I end it now, no one will ever know what happened to me or Ezequiel," he thought. In that moment, something shifted. Jose decided that if the sea wouldn't kill him, he would live. "I'll survive, even if it's just to show this damn ocean I won't give in." That small, stubborn thought kept him alive in the days that followed. Every drop of rainwater, every fish caught with his bare hands, became an act of defiance, a reminder that he was still there, defying the impossible. As the weeks passed, Jose had to adapt to a new kind of routine. He used a cooler as shelter from the sun, curling up inside it during the hottest parts of the day to avoid severe burns. When it rained, he rushed out with every container he had, catching each drop as if it were liquid gold. The nights were the worst. The cold was biting, and the star-filled sky seemed to mock his solitude. Jose stared at the distant lights, wondering if anyone, anywhere, was thinking about him. Despite his efforts to maintain his sanity, there were days when he simply sat in the boat and cried. The ocean seemed endless, as if he were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. But even in those moments, something within him kept fighting. "I'm still here," he repeated to himself, like a mantra. The isolation was absolute, but Jose had made a pact with himself. He would live, and as long as there was life in his body, he would not give up. After months adrift, Jose's mind was no longer the same. The extreme isolation began to play tricks on him. There were days when he thought he heard voices or saw shapes on the horizon. But on one particular day, something seemed different and real. Far away, he spotted what appeared to be a ship. It wasn't a mirage. Jose's heart raced as it hadn't in weeks. He stood up, his frail body trembling, and began shouting, "Hey, here! I'm here!" He waved a piece of fabric, flailing his arms, doing anything he could to be noticed. For a moment, it seemed like the ship was heading his way. Tears streamed down Jose's face as he believed his ordeal was finally coming to an end. But as time passed, he realized the ship wasn't changing course. It simply continued on its path, distant and indifferent. This sense of abandonment was devastating. Imagine standing there, pouring all your hope into what seemed to be your salvation, only to watch it disappear on the horizon. Did they see me and ignore me? Does no one care? He wondered, feeling the weight of the ocean pressing not just on his body, but on his very soul. This is one of the cruel truths of the sea. It is so vast and impersonal that, often, you are nothing more than an invisible speck in its expanse. But the ocean is also unpredictable, and within its vastness, it can offer unexpected gifts. One day, Jose noticed something different in the air. The wind carried a peculiar scent, something he could barely remember, the smell of land. He stood up, his heart racing. And there it was, palm trees swaying in the distance, like a mirage. That, this time, was real. It's land, he shouted to himself, tears streaming down his face. But the land wasn't easily reachable. The currents pulled at him, and the boat seemed to resist the destination that was so close. With the last of his strength, Jose paddled with his hands. His palms were raw, his skin torn. But he didn't stop. I won't die this close to home, he repeated to himself over and over, like a mantra. When he finally reached Ibon, atoll on the Marshall Islands, his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the sand. Jose grabbed handfuls of sand like it was a trophy, a prize won through sweat, tears, and blood. The firm ground was everything he had dreamed of for months, but now that he was there, all Jose could do was weep. Imagine for a moment what he felt: the relief of being alive, the shock of having overcome the impossible, and the pain of remembering everything he had lost along the way. It was a mix of gratitude and grief, a victory with a bitter taste. That night, lying under the palm trees and away from the constant sound of the waves, Jose had his first peaceful sleep in more than a year. But he knew the challenge wasn't over. His fight now was to convince the world that everything he had endured was real. The next morning, Jose woke up to something he hadn't heard in months: human voices. He opened his eyes and saw two figures approaching, a man and a woman. They were Amy and Russell, locals from the atoll. The two looked at Jose with a mix of curiosity, caution, and disbelief. "Are you okay?" Amy asked. But Jose couldn't respond immediately. His throat was dry, and his mind was still reeling from the abrupt transition between the ocean and civilization. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse and faint. "I'm alive." Amy and Russell quickly brought him food and water. Each sip and each bite felt like a gift from the heavens. But Jose couldn't hold back his tears. As he ate and drank, all he could think about was the suffering he endured to reach this moment. When Jose told them the date he had set out to see, the two locals exchanged incredulous looks. 14 months had passed. It was a story that was hard to believe. Still, as they looked at Jose's emaciated body, his tattered clothes, and the trauma etched into his face, they knew he wasn't lying. Russell gestured toward the boat. "And this?" he asked. Jose glanced at the small vessel that had been his home, his torment, and his salvation. "You can keep it. I never want to see that boat again," he replied. Amy and Russell contacted the Marshall Islands government, which sent a boat to transport Jose to the capital, Mayuro. By the time he arrived, his story had already begun to spread. Local and international journalists were captivated by the idea of someone surviving so long at sea. But with the curiosity came skepticism. How could anyone survive for 14 months? And most importantly, what had happened to the young man who had set out with him? Jose wasn't prepared for the pointed questions. He was still trying to process his survival, and every detail he shared seemed harder to explain. Still, he stuck to his account. "I did what I had to do to survive. I lost a friend, but I made it. That's all." Doctors examined Jose and confirmed he was severely malnourished and dehydrated. But astonishingly, he didn't have any major health problems. "It's a miracle," the doctors said. But not everyone was convinced. The first headlines were a mix of admiration and doubt. The Pacific miracle was how some newspapers described his ordeal. Others, more sensationalist, asked, "Survivor or liar?" For Jose, none of that mattered at the moment. He had beaten the impossible. Now, all he wanted was peace. As Jose Alvarenga's story gained international attention, doubts began to grow. How could someone survive 14 months adrift with so few resources? Journalists, survival experts, and the public started scrutinizing every detail of his account. But what intrigued people most was the fate of Ezequiel Cordoba, the young man who had started the journey with Jose but never lived to see its end. Jose's explanation was straightforward yet heartbreaking. Ezequiel had fallen into depression, stopped eating, and died of starvation. Jose had done everything he could to help him, but it wasn't enough. Despite this, rumors began to spread. Some speculated that Jose might have resorted to cannibalism to survive. Others insinuated there might have been a fight or even foul play. The theory of cannibalism gained traction after a sensationalist tabloid published the headline, "Survivor confesses, did he kill to live?" Jose was devastated by these accusations. "I lost a friend, and now they want to say I took his life," he lamented in a rare interview. He refused to discuss the details of Ezequiel's death further, but his silence only fueled the speculation. The pressure was overwhelming. Jose began avoiding the media and rarely gave interviews. "What happened at sea is between me, God, and the ocean," he would say, trying to put an end to the scrutiny. But his silence only piqued public curiosity. The families involved sought answers, too. Ezequiel's mother, in particular, wanted to know what really happened to her son. "He promised me he'd come back. How could he just disappear like that?" she asked. Social media didn't help. People created conspiracy theories and spread rumors. Some claimed Jose was a master manipulator who had fabricated the entire story for fame. Others saw him as a hero burdened with unspeakable truths. Jose, meanwhile, tried to move on with his life. He knew he could never erase the trauma of what he had endured, but he was determined to find some semblance of peace. "I know what happened, and that's enough," he said, as if trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. While his story of survival continued to captivate the world, the mystery surrounding Ezequiel lingered like a shadow over Jose's account. With so much doubt surrounding his story, Jose agreed to take a polygraph test to prove he was telling the truth. The test was organized by a television program, eager to address the public's skepticism. But for Jose, this was more than a publicity stunt. It was his chance to restore his dignity. The questions were direct. Did you kill Ezequiel Cordoba? No. Did you consume Ezequiel's body? Never. When the results were revealed, Jose passed the test. He wasn't lying. For Jose, the test brought relief, but even this wasn't enough for everyone. Some critics claimed polygraphs weren't entirely reliable. "Passing the test doesn't mean he's telling the whole truth," a skeptic commented. Still, for Jose, it was a step toward putting the accusations behind him. After months under the media's spotlight, Jose decided to return to his hometown and reconnect with his family. He hadn't seen his daughter since she was a child, and their reunion was deeply emotional. "I thought I'd never see you again, Dad," she said as she hugged him tightly. Returning home brought challenges, too. Some treated him as a hero, while others eyed him with suspicion. His mother, who had spent countless nights praying for her son's safety, cared only that he was alive. "You're back, and that's all that matters," she told him, holding his hands. Jose apologized for the distance he had created. "I thought I was going to die out there, Mom. All I could think about was how much I wanted to come home." For his family, his return was enough. There was one visit Jose knew he had to make, no matter how painful: meeting Ezequiel Cordoba's mother to talk about her son's final days. She welcomed him with a sad yet understanding look. "I just want to know what happened to my son," she said, holding a photo of Ezequiel. Jose recounted everything: how strong Ezequiel had been at the start, how the depression and hunger gradually consumed him, and how they had prayed together in his final moments. He described holding Ezequiel's body for days, hoping for a miracle, before finally laying him to rest at sea. Tears streamed down her face, but there was a sense of closure in hearing the story. "I know you did everything you could," she said softly. Ezequiel is at peace now. For Jose, the conversation was an important step toward healing. He couldn't change the past, but he could honor Ezequiel's memory by sharing the truth, no matter how painful. Over time, experts began to analyze Jose Alvarenga's story, attempting to determine if surviving 14 months adrift in the Pacific was truly possible. Studies of ocean currents confirmed that the route Jose described was plausible. The Kuroshio current, flowing from the Mexican coast to the Marshall Islands, could have carried the small boat to its final destination. Additionally, biologists and nutritionists evaluated Jose's survival diet of raw fish, birds, and turtles. While extreme, this diet, combined with the occasional collection of rainwater, could have provided just enough sustenance to keep him alive. The science doesn't explain everything, but the evidence suggests that Jose's survival is possible, a maritime survival researcher stated. This acknowledgement lent credibility to Jose's story, but, as always, some skeptics remain unconvinced. Jose's journey was documented in the book For 138 Days, written by Jonathan Franklin, who conducted extensive interviews with him. The book detailed not only the physical challenges Jose faced, but also the psychological toll of his ordeal. While the book solidified Jose's story as one of the greatest survival narratives ever recorded, it also continued to spark debates. Some people still clung to the darker theories, perhaps out of sensationalism, or simply an unwillingness to believe that someone could endure such an ordeal. For many, however, Jose became a symbol of resilience. His story inspired not only fishermen, but also ordinary people, facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. "If he survived 14 months in the ocean, I can survive my problems," was a sentiment often echoed by those who read his account. Jose's story wasn't just about his own survival. It carried a universal message about the strength of the human spirit. Despite the accusations, doubts, and tragedies, Jose's journey demonstrated what people can endure when faced with the impossible. He used his experience to advocate for better safety measures for fishermen and to highlight the dangers faced by those who rely on the ocean for their livelihoods. Jose also spoke about mental resilience, sharing how he found the will to live even when everything seemed lost. "I was alone, surrounded by nothing but water, and I still found a reason to survive. That's something I want everyone to remember. You're stronger than you think," Jose said in one of his final public interviews. Jose Alvarenga's story is not just about physical endurance. It's a testament to the power of faith, hope, and the will to live. His journey revealed the depths of human resilience and the sacrifices people make to survive. Even with the lingering questions and controversies, Jose's experience remains one of the most remarkable survival tales ever told. And you, what do you think about this incredible survival journey? Do you believe it was possible? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this one and help us grow on YouTube. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story, I'm leaving a video here on the screen that I'm sure you'll love. Feel free to watch it. I'm signing off, sailors, and see you in the next sea story.